ourselves. You try and disciple a young person, and and when you're trying to pour into their life and give them a reference point, you know, if the mission of God is rooted out of the text, and we live in such a cynical culture where they just refuse to, you know, come under the authority of something other than their own opinion and thoughts and perspective, I think that's a real challenge, because you get people excited about something, but when you challenge them and try and keep them accountable, and they're just simply not willing to, who are you to tell me, and who's that book to tell me how to follow Jesus?
Yeah, I think,
I think that's a real issue.
Yeah, the autonomous self and all that. Yeah, it's a huge issue.
So in the end, what? What's your reaction to that?
I think I'm not sure how to answer that. I think that you know, the whole grounds are shifting of how people find authority. I think the notion of the Bible as having a claim on my life and having a right to determine, deep down most people, and I think you're hinting at this, don't really believe that it has that right any longer. Other authorities are counter-claiming. It's a huge issue. I think that I'm reading a book at the moment which is really stimulating me, which kind of refers to the post-liberals as a movement. Again, this is, you know, to do with Hauerwas and Yoder. Post-liberalism, as I understand it, I'm a hack on it, but it says that actually the Bible is its own authority, has its own logic and worldview, and the only way you understand it is from within itself. When we measure the Bible by external standards, be it human reason or the validity of human freedom or liberal kind of understandings of human society and democracy, they become tests by which we measure the scriptures. But then you're giving this the authority, not the scriptures the authority. But the scriptures are only understood within its own kind of logic. And I think, you know, how we that's theoretical, but how we actually get people of God to actually own that the scriptures, you know, actually give us a comprehensive worldview that one is worth living, is a huge issue. How do we convince the culture? I mean, you're more the communicator in this regard than I am.
Well, I know that I just continually, our culture has one popular story, which is liberation from oppression. That's our narrative.
Yeah, it's the liberal ideal of democracy and
so young
society.
I find a lot of young believers love the idea of Jesus as the ultimate liberator from oppression, except that ends up just becoming an infinite loop, because the second you feel oppressed by anything, accountability in the church, the requirements of Jesus, you push it off as you're oppressing me and I need to be liberated from it. I'm trying to wrestle, I think in our context, discipling new believers, young believers, in engaging the world, living out their faith, being Jesus people, when they simply go, the second I feel oppressed, I'm not going to submit to this authority, you're the tyranny, self-liberation. Yeah. You know, it's hard.
John, I reckon, I wonder whether part of the issue is that I wonder whether the church has the right to kind of do that with us. Whether really, I guess my answer would be to say, like, I find it easy to submit to Jesus. There's a big rebel in me when it comes to, I think it's a healthy rebellion, mostly holy. But I want to call into question a lot of the authorities that are just assumed in the ecclesia or the church. Because I think it's really bound us up in so many ways. Jesus' lordship I find so appealing. When as a Jew, right, so for instance, I have great respect for Judaism, awesome amounts. I think it's a very insightful religion. But the God I find there, and my own heritage, I find I could fear that God. I don't know if I could love him that easily. It would be more a love fear, I think. When I look at Jesus, I think, if God is like Christ, really like Jesus, which I think is what the Gospel of John teaches us, God is like Christ, and in him there is no unChrist-likeness at all. If God is like that, I can go there, because Jesus has got my heart. And I wonder whether really it's about really attaching people and their love and association deeply with this particular person, Jesus. And out of that, I think he can win our hearts.
So is it? I mean, is that kind of the answer? When I mean, really, it's a relational authority that comes to an understanding of who Jesus really is, which then gives the authority to Scripture, which they submit their lives to, because of the relational authority they come to know through Jesus.
The challenge we see is that people love Jesus in the Gospels, they don't like the correction of the epistles. So, Jesus, yes, liberator, loving the outcast. If God's like that, I'm in. But then when Paul comes into a community, he's like, hey, listen, your immorality is worse than the world, man. Come on. My job's not to judge the world, so I'm not here to dictate morality from a position of power to the culture. Yeah, but Like, come on. And that's when I find people going, who are you to tell me? And it's purely relational. It's not church hierarchy. It is tension, I think. And that's great language, relational authority. The tension ends up being, it's really hard to scale relational authority because it takes time when there is no trust to build that relationship, and it's really hard to do that by the thousands. And I think that's where it gets hard for us, you know, that we have to have such an emphasis and priority on relationships, regardless of how we do it. You know, I don't think there's anything more virtuous about having a small church than a large church or whatever, but I think keeping those dynamics in place, that's key for mission.